Hey, this is Coach Nick Tuminello, and I want to welcome you to Secrets of Single Leg Training. In this DVD, we're going to cover the Performance University approach to single leg training and demonstrate a wide variety of what we feel to be the best of the best single leg training exercise applications. Single leg training can really be broken down into three categories: single leg squat variations, single leg deadlift variations, and what I call hybrid combinations of those variations. In order to make this DVD as user-friendly and as easy to follow as possible, we've dedicated a specific section to each of those three individual concepts with single leg training. Before we get into the specific exercise applications in regards to single leg training, let's cover a few important points. Single leg training is often debated against bilateral training. Here at Performance University, we encourage you to use both single leg training and bilateral training, which is double leg training, in conjunction to make your workouts more comprehensive and more effective. We don't get involved in those arguments or those debates. We just say, if it works, use it. So we use both methods here. That being said, the focus of this DVD is on unilateral training. When you hear the term single leg training, most people think standing on one leg. That's not wrong, but it's not 100% correct either. Here at Performance University, we classify single leg training in three ways: standing on a single leg, split stance, like so, and then also lunging, forward, backward side, and stepping variations. So anything that involves dominance on one side relative to the other, to us, is single-sided training. And if you really think about that from a functional perspective, rarely in sports, unless you're running, are you always on one leg. Normally, you have one leg that's dominating and the other one that's kind of helping out. So in the DVD and the exercise applications that we're getting ready to cover, you'll see three different types of exercise applications. You'll see single leg exercise applications, you'll see split stance exercise applications, and you'll see lunging and stepping exercise applications. Now, I'd like to start off the single leg squat section telling you about an exercise or a few exercise variations that I don't use before I start telling you about the exercises I do use. We don't use pistol squats or any variations of the pistol squats here at Performance University, and I'll give you a couple reasons why. First off, most of my training is dictated by what I see in sport, daily living, things like that, general function. So I have the discipline to look at that, and sometimes I'll look at that and abandon what I maybe learned from other coaches or what tradition has told us. And I know pistol squats are a very, very popular exercise. I don't think they're bad. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm not telling you not to do them. All I'm telling you is that here at Performance University, we don't use them because we've found what we feel are better options. So when you think about the pistol squat, someone has a leg out in front, and then they drop down, and the people that are really good get all the way down nice and deep like this, and then come up. It's very, very impressive. It's pretty cool looking. It's not a bad exercise. My problem is the position. If you saw me doing a double leg squat, I had the barbell on my back or I was holding a dumbbell in front, and I was like this, you would go, ooh, Nick, that's not really good. So if it's not good on two legs, then why is it good on one leg? That's my question. Those positions, anytime someone puts a leg out in front of them to counterbalance, even just doing it this way, might better keep your back a little straighter there, but still, I don't see this position as something that's really teaching an athlete or teaching an exercise enthusiast how to move better in their life, because I don't see this really carrying over to that. What I see is this position with the leg behind. With the leg behind, it allows me to get a little more hip in there, and that looks like an acceleration for running. It looks like a wrestling shot. It looks like what someone's doing to bend over and pick something up. So basing this exercise off of what I just told you, here's what we choose to do as our single leg squat instead of the pistol squat. We call this a knee tap squat. So I'm going to start with 2 pads. You could use phone books, you could use a aerobic step. It's really up to you. I'm going to stand in front of it. I'm going to go heel to butt, not so hard that I spasm my hamstring. And the goal here is put my hands out in front of me. I tell my clients, put your hands out in front like a zombie. And I'm going to try to touch my back knee, not my shin, to the middle of the pad, like so, and come up. Now look at that position. I can keep a straighter back. And this looks like something that's a little more athletic. And that also looks like this. Look at this position, and if I put this leg down, that's what happens when you squat. So this brings me to something about what we hear often, knee dominant training. My question is, why would I want to just have all the load through my knee when I can share it across my whole lower body? That's more efficient. It's not only more efficient, but it's more knee friendly, because now all 3 of my joints and even the stabilizers of my back are dealing with the load together as a unit, right? And as we say, train movements, train muscles. This is training both movements and muscles, but it's not punishing one area. So if they get good at this, or if you get good at this, then we're going to take away one level. So now you have to go lower. And the goal is to tap the knee and return. Notice I'm tapping the knee and I'm not falling backwards. And that's why I say try to touch your knee and not touch your shin or your toe, because that means you're falling backwards. Now if you lose your balance a couple times, that's fine. As long as you're not losing your balance every rep. If you're losing your balance every rep, the exercise might need to be regressed a little bit. And the simple way to regress it is stack up another pad or do a rear foot elevated version, which I'll cover here momentarily. So go down nice and slow, tap, and come up. And then finally, if that gets easier, we're going to do it 100% without anything to the floor. So let me show you front version. Here, good alignment, drop down slow, tap my knee, and return. Now I don't mind you coming forward a little bit there, because that's what happens in a good squat, as long as you don't round too much. So if I need to regress this exercise, we can utilize the pads. I can just put a foot up like so, and then do the same thing here, coming down. And what that does, it just gives me an additional base of support. And of course, the lower I go, the harder I make it. So there's a couple ways now to add load to these exercises, whether you need to do the rear foot elevated version or you need to do the freestanding version. And what I'm telling you here is now, I'm always going to pick the freestanding version over the rear foot elevated version. I've seen a lot of people make that a priority exercise and really load it up pretty major. To me, we don't take that approach. My priority is to get you doing this single leg squat variation without the support of the bench. And if we can load that, that's going to be our priority. This is a regression, so to help someone build up to this movement, not the other way around. So if I want to add load, I can hold a dumbbell in front of my chest, like a goblet position, and come down. You can go as heavy as you like. You can hold dumbbells by your side. You can hold a barbell in your shoulders, what they call, in your elbows, excuse me, what they call Zercher position. And you can also try it across your shoulders. We've only had some success with trying it across your shoulders, unless you're very, very mobile and very, very strong. People have a tendency to want to cave in there. So we like the Zercher position, the barbell through the elbows, the goblet position, or the dumbbells down by your sides. So that's probably my top single leg squat variation. If you need to regress, support with the bench. If you want to progress, increase the range of motion or increase the load. Now, one thing I wanted to cover in regards to knee dominant training, which I had mentioned that term, talking about why we don't use the pistol squat. That's a common term that's thrown around these days in the strength conditioning world, knee dominant training. And as I said, we're looking for a load share, not necessarily to dominate one joint. But if you are looking to get a little very specific knee targeted training, I'm going to show you a great exercise that I learned from famous physical therapist Kevin Wilk at one of his lectures that was regarding all the new research, concepts, and techniques in regards to knee rehabilitation. One of the mistakes that people make that I learned from Kevin when they talk about knee dominant training is where they put the load. I see a lot of people, doing these squats and hold dumbbells out here like this. Even though that helps you counterbalance and keep your torso upright, one of the things that Kevin had talked about is, unless the load is behind you, is behind the knee, it's really not purely quad dominant and knee dominant. The true way to get a knee dominant movement is you need to have your heel higher than your foot. That creates a counterbalance. And the weight needs to be behind you. So here's what we came up with for that. And I showed this to Kevin. He liked it. Put this underneath your glutes. My heel is slightly elevated. So now the weight is now behind me. And then I want to try to sit down, tap my butt, and come up. This bench is a little bit low for me. Let's see if I can control it better. And then come up. Now that is a knee dominant movement. As soon as I put this weight out in front of me and roll forward, what your body's trying to do is get your center of gravity ahead of your knee, which is still, even though it doesn't appear that way, you're still primarily working on the posterior aspect of your body, not primarily the quads. So that's a great concept if you're looking at maybe the later stages of a knee rehabilitation program. If you're really looking at someone who you're trying to strengthen their quad for a specific reason, maybe you're into physique sports and you're really trying to target your quad in a more functional way than just sitting on a leg extension, which we do use here as well. But I wanted to make that clear. Most of what you see that's called knee dominant training is truly not knee dominant training. That, based on what I've learned and based on what the research says, is knee dominant training. The question that I can't really answer for you is the application. Here at Performance University, we've only used this exercise when we've been advised by a physical therapist for one reason or the other, but it's not a regular component of our program, but I did think it was important to address here to make that clarification. This next exercise I'm going to show you, I learned from my very good friend Juan Carlos Santana out of the Institute of Human Performance in Boca Raton, Florida. I have to say it's probably my all-time favorite quad-oriented squatting movement. It's a partial range of motion. We call it pumps, or he calls it pumps, so I stole the name from him. We also call it pumps. And you're not really going that deep, so I'll explain why we shorten the range of motion in a bit. Let me show you how to do the exercise first. It is a little silly looking, I'll give you that, but it's still effective nonetheless. So let me show you without the band first, actually. So basically what I'm going to do, let me bring my shorts up so you can kind of see what's happening. I'm going to get a single leg position. I'm going to bend my knee slightly to get some tension. And then I'm going to just drop down about 1/3 of the way into a squat, and then I'm going to come up. Now, I'm not going to fully lock my knee out. I'm just going to keep some tension in my thigh there. And I'm just going to pump back and forth. It's a great way also to kind of assess someone's alignment, or actually teach them how to keep their knee in better alignment. And then we're going to do this in a little higher repetitions. Normally go 25 or above on these because the range of motion is short, and to create a strengthening training stimulus, you need to up the repetitions a little bit. Now you may look at that and go, well, why don't you go all the way down? Well, we covered that in the single leg knee tap squat. But the reason why we like to focus on this kind of, I would say, a mid-range movement is if I'm training a boxer, focus on what's happening at their knees while they're moving and they're throwing punches. They're only going through this range of motion. How about when I run? You're only going about that when you run. So when sprinting, when running, when making athletic cuts and things like that, changes of direction, those are normally the range of motion that you're staying in. And muscles are the strongest in their mid-range. And there's a lot of research out there that shows, and plus it makes common sense, that your body becomes strongest in the range of motion that you use the muscles in. Well, if I'm working with an athlete or the average individual, rarely are they going all the way down like this anyway. We want to train those ranges so we have them. But there's nothing wrong with focusing on the primary ranges that they're going to be using in life and in sport. That's why we really like this exercise. Plus, it's a very functional way to develop some good quadricep strength and single leg support. So let me show you how we like to load this movement up. Because I like to do this movement fast, bands are a great way to load it. There's actually two ways we like to load it. First, you step on the band, hold the bands kind of like two grocery bags, lift it up, single leg balance, slight bend in my knee, drop down here just so I feel the tension go out of the band and explode out of it. So the concept here is just like why a power lifter would do band squats. It's accommodating resistance. The band gets heavier as I start to stand up, which is where I get stronger. The band gets lighter as I start to drop down, where I get weaker. So we've just embraced that concept and applied it to many different exercises. Plus, from a knee alignment perspective, look at this. If I want to drop my knee in, it hits the band. So the band is almost like a cue to give yourself or your client feedback to keep their knee in alignment. That's a lot harder than it may look, I can promise you that. The other way to do it is you can take the band like so, slide your head into it, put it across the back, the bottom part of your neck, not up here where it's uncomfortable. Grab it with your hands. The lower I grab it, the more tension I'm going to lift. So grab it here, stand up nice and tall. See, the band again is that cue there. And then I can work here as well. Notice I'm staying fairly tall as I do this. And I'm trying to get about a rep a second here. Boom, 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 very, very fast. And if you can bang out 30 reps in 30 seconds of these pumps with a band this size, half an inch or so, that's pretty strong. And your clients and yourself will notice significant boosts in their performance because this feels just like running, cutting, quick hops and changes of direction. This is the specific range of motion that they're in. So what we can also do is use a free weight concept. So imagine if I was just holding a barbell or something like that. I can hold the barbell in my elbows and go here. I can hold two dumbbells by my side down here like this and do it as well. It's really personal preference. Like I said, my go-to is the band because I like to do these fast. We seem to get the best results that way. We like to go for about a rep a second. So either you have the band wrapped under your feet and you hold it like two grocery bags, or you have the band behind your neck and you're holding it this way. That's my go-to option. Before we move on off the topic of single leg pumps, I wanted to show you a regression just in case you have trouble with the balance. You can use the bands or not use the bands, but basically what I'm going to do here, so let's say I'm using the bands, I want to put my other foot down. If I put it too far back, like a split squat, now I've changed the force vectors of the exercise. So I need to just put this foot down so all my weight stays here. Hardly any weight on this foot, it's just now kind of like a kickstand. And I can go and use the same application. So I can pick this foot up at any time. And the general rule of thumb to see, or that how I find out whether my client is actually using their back leg or just kind of basing on it, is when they pick the back leg up, does their body weight shift forward? So if I'm like this, I can't pick this foot up without shifting forward. Then I know they're using that leg. But if they're here, and I say pick your foot up, and they pick it up but no change happens here, then I know that that back foot is really just acting as an additional base of support, but it's not changing the way that I'm trying to load their body. Another one of my favorite single leg squat variations is what I call the leg drop squat. Basically, you're going to stand long ways on a bench. You obviously have to have good single leg balance for this one and be comfortable at a little bit of a height. This foot should be, my non-weight bearing leg I should say, should be behind my weight bearing foot. I don't want it like that, I want it like that. That kind of gives me a counterbalance and also keeps me out of that pistol squat kind of position, like I said, that I don't really utilize. And then from here, you can put your hands out like a zombie if you want. I'm going to go down and try to touch my toe, keeping this heel flat, gently on the ground, and bring it up. So I always tell my clients, pretend it's hot coals down there. You don't want to rest on it. You just want to tap it. Now, if they can do that easily, touching the toe, then I say try to touch your back heel. Touching the back heel forces you to go lower. So I like to do heel or toe. I don't like to go flat foot because flat foot tends to encourage them to just flop down. So if we go toe, I can see their heel drop, and if they go heel, I can see their toe drop, and they're trying to use their foot. So again, if we're going toe, point the toe down and touch the top of the toe. If they're good at that, toe up and touch the back of the heel. And I don't want to see this knee trying to help them out. What the focus of this exercise here is pure single leg strength. So we want to make sure that the other leg is not really involved in the movement. Let's cover some split squat variations. I like the split squat because it's kind of in between a double leg squat and a single leg squat. If we want to get some unilateral training into our clients' programs, but they're not necessarily ready to stand on a single leg, this is a great middle ground for that. So a basic split squat, we want to start them here and then just drop straight down. I don't mind if this knee starts to move slightly in front of the toe. I know that's a big rule. Everybody says don't never let your knee go in front of the toe. Well, the first thing I should tell them is, well, what about your back knee? Your back knee couldn't be farther in front of your toe. And if you're supporting your weight like this, again, I can't lift this foot up without leaning forward. It is supporting weight. So we have to be consistent with what we say. Now, if it creates knee pain, that's something different, but that's beyond the scope of this video. It's more for physical therapists to deal with. The big thing here is that they're not going like this. Watch my knee. They're not driving forward. They're still going down, but this is a natural movement here, right? So as long as this feels good, I have no problem with a basic split squat. Now, if I want to make it a little more quad-oriented, especially if I'm working with a physique competitor, we're going to spread that legs out more. So now that my shin angle is actually pointed back towards me, it's longer than you might think. And I can have dumbbells, hold the barbell here, even hold the barbell behind my glutes, which I'll demonstrate. And I'm going to come straight down and up, straight down and up from there. This gives me a big stretch in my hip flexors, which helps a lot of people who sit often. Kind of reverses that sitting posture. And it really forces this quad to turn on because it's almost like a leg extension. I have to push myself back, so it's a standing leg extension. Let's talk about the rear foot elevated split squat. I know it's pretty popular these days. As I mentioned before, I don't like to go heavy with this. To me, this is not a replacement for the squat. To me, it's just a unilateral training version. In fact, I actually don't advise to go really, really heavy on this exercise because I think it's a dangerous position to have a lot of weight on your back and put your foot way up here. You know, you miss that lift, possibilities for you getting hurt go way up. So we normally gravitate towards holding dumbbells when we want to overload this movement. But what I'm really discussing here is the height of the box, or the height of the object that you decide to use to elevate your rear foot. Most people use a bench because that's what's most readily available. Unless you're really tall, I think the bench is probably a little bit too high. The higher you get your back foot, the more it tilts you forward. And a lot of the EMG research shows that even though it's called a rear foot elevated squat, the primary muscle group that's getting hit there are your glutes. And squats are more quad oriented. Again, you can't isolate one out for the other, but squats are more quad oriented. So if I'm looking at a squat variation, not a deadlift variation, which we'll cover, I'm going to use a lower box, which allows me to stay up taller, and then try to drop straight down, keeping my chest high. And of course, I can load this how I want. Dumbbell is normally my preferred preference, single or double, holding in hand, suitcase position. And I want to try to keep the dumbbells behind my shin, right down by my side. So that's how we would do that. The way we coach the front foot elevated version, which I really like, this is definitely a great way to get your quads. Because look, as soon as I put my foot up here and I get my weight on it, I'm turned on here. Whereas with the rear foot elevated version, I could lock that knee out. Here, if I lock my knee out, I just put all my weight on my back foot. So if I tell my clients, keep your weight on your front foot and then drop straight down, tap your knee, and come back up. Look, this helps me go lower than I normally would be going with the floor. If I was just on the floor, because I have this distance now to cover, which also helps me get a greater stretch on my hip flexors. Again, we're reversing the sitting posture, and then come up. So, those are my favorite split squat variations to do if we want to incorporate some unilateral training into our clients or athletes' programs. I showed you how we coach them. Again, follow a range of motion that you can control. That goes for every exercise I'm going to show you. And depending on what your goals are, whether you're training for strength or training for muscle size or for speed. If you're training for speed, try to move a little faster. If you're training for strength, up the weight a little bit, less reps, more sets. If you're training for muscle size, maybe for physique or appearance, you just want to look good at the beach, then you want to up the reps a little bit, lower the weight, and stay maybe in a 3 to 4 set range. That really is dependent on your goals, but the form and the concepts of the way you would execute the exercises stays the same. So now let's talk about some deadlift variations or single leg deadlift variations. All these are very, very knee-friendly options for folks that may have had trouble with the squat options because of knee pains, limitations, things of that nature. So there's two primary ways to do the most fundamental single leg deadlift variation, which is the single leg Romanian deadlift. You can either go with 2 hands or with 1 hand. 2 hands can be used with 2 dumbbells or a barbell, or with a single hand. I prefer to start, folks, with a single arm, single leg version, and here's why. When most people bend over to do the single leg deadlift, what happens is they become a little dominant at their lateral hamstring, so they want to turn like that. That turns their back foot out. Lost my balance there. Turn this back foot out, and that could put some torque in the back, and it's just not optimal form. But by reaching this hand across the body like this, you see how that starts to balance out my hip? So it kind of automatically puts them in good form and starts to condition the body and the brain through repetitions in the pattern that we want. So the more they do it, the better off they get. So let me demonstrate that. So what we're looking for here is a flat pelvis, single leg balance, slight bend in the knee, and then we just hinge right at the hip, come down, come up nice and tall, hinge right at the hip, come up nice and tall. As that becomes easier, then we're going to progress to the 2-arm version. I know you might think, well, because I have, right now I'm holding 30-pound dumbbells, which is not very heavy for this exercise, but you would think maybe they kind of balance me out. But they really don't. This is actually a little bit tougher because they keep me in the center. I have to then control my hips and pelvis, whereas the single version pulled me where I wanted my client to go. So now they have to be conscious of it, where the single arm version, it kind of happens automatically. So I hope you understand that. So here's what we'll do for the double leg version. Now, there's another way to do this you may or may not seen, and I promise to show you some new variations in this section as well, where instead of just raising this back foot, we're going to slide it back. So it's going to kind of hover over the ground, and I'm going to just slide it back as far as I can, reaching it back, and then scissor it forward. Slide it back as far as I can. I'm reaching it long. Bring it up. One more. Slide it back and scissor up. So what I'm doing is kind of going like this, and then I'm using my front hamstring, my left leg, to pull my back leg up. You'll feel that actually engages your hamstring a little bit more, maybe, than the Romanian deadlift. And the reason why I say maybe is I have no proof of that. I have no science to back that up. All I'm really kind of doing is basing it on feel. But the goal here is training variety. So if you've been using the Romanian deadlift where you're just hinging at your hips, try that leg slide version to create a new training stimulus. Now here's 2 cable versions of the single leg Romanian deadlift that change the force vector of the exercise, which changes the way that you're stimulating the muscles of your glutes and hamstrings. It's also a little bit easier on your back. So right now I have this about belly button level or below shoulder level. So mid-torso is about where you want it. I'm going to hold it in my right hand, balance on my left leg just like we did with the dumbbell, and then I'm going to reach straight through. Same form applies, hinging at my hip, and then I'm going to pull through. So now I have my left glute turning on. Let me change sides here so I'm a little bit closer to the camera so you can see. So now I'm hinging here. The difference between this exercise and the dumbbell version is where I'm getting the point of maximal loading on my hips and my hamstrings, hips meaning glutes. Here, this position is where I got the point of maximal loading on my glutes and hamstrings because I'm going against gravity. Here, it's minimal. Where this exercise is the toughest is when I'm at the top of the position, where the dumbbell exercise was the easiest when I stood. So it's the same exercise, but the vector is coming horizontally as opposed to gravity loaded, which is always vertical. So keep that in mind when you're trying to create a well-rounded, well-balanced program. If you only had one option to pick between the dumbbell version or the cable version, I would do this version, which I'm about to show you. Put the cable down low so it's at a diagonal, and you get a little bit, about kind of the best of each. I'm still getting resistance at the bottom, and I'm still getting resistance at the top. The maximal load is about right there where the cable becomes 90 degrees to my torso. Same form applies. Pelvis flat, hinging at my hip. Now what do I do if the single leg is tough on my balance? I take this back foot and I just use it as a kickstand. All right, I don't sit back on it like this because it changes the exercise. I can pick it up at any time and I still just hinge at my hip. See, I have a soft knee, 15 degrees bend or so, and then I just hinge right here. And even with a few reps, I can really feel these. At any time, I can pick this foot up and it doesn't change the exercise. So right there, we just gave you one exercise, but you have a multitude of ways to change the force vectors. And if I wanted to use two hands, whether it be on the cable high or mid-torso or cable low, that's fine too. Just grab it with two hands. And now I have that version to work with as well. Remember, that's a little bit tougher because now I have to stabilize myself through my core, whereas the single arm version kind of counterbalanced me to do it for you. So you have the cable version and the dumbbell version, two of my favorite versions of single leg Romanian deadlifts. Now if you remember what I was referring to when I was talking to the knee dominant aspects of squatting, we talked about as long as the torso is behind the knee, it becomes very knee dominant. Well, the inverse also applies. The further you lean forward, the more hip dominant the movement becomes. And because we're talking about deadlift variations, we're definitely looking at more of a hip dominant type movement, which to me, these are a little bit more sport specific anyway, because most of the time we bend primarily at the hips. That's why your glutes are the biggest muscle in your body. So let me show you my all-time favorite single leg deadlift variation. We call it anterior lunge. It's a combination of a forward lunge with a single leg Romanian deadlift. So check this out. So I'm going to hold some dumbbells. The weight's going to be determined by what you can, how well you can keep your form. I'm going to do a smaller step forward than I would on a regular lunge. And then as soon as my foot hits, I'm just going to hinge at my hip, running the dumbbells right down my thigh. And now I'm going to fire that. Now, for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to keep the same leg for a little bit, and then I'll show you both legs. So it's not 1, 2, like that. It's one movement and one movement back. Here and here. So I'm stepping out, soft knee bend in my front leg, big arch in my back, all the same rules apply as a Romanian deadlift, and then I'm hinging at my hip. I really don't need my weight on my back foot, so I pick my heel up on my back foot. If your heel is down on the back foot, you're not doing it correctly. So let me show you a couple reps alternating legs. So that's how you do anterior lunges. Now, let me warn you about that exercise. That exercise, if you've never done it before, even if you go pretty light, maybe even just body weight, will probably cause you to have some soreness in your glutes and hamstrings like you've never felt before. Why is that? Because it's an extremely high eccentric load before the concentric contraction. Your glutes may not be used to doing that with that lunge movement. It's a lot more eccentric, and eccentric stress tends to make you a little bit more sore than concentric actions. So just be warned, kind of work into that exercise easy. Now, I also discussed the rear foot elevated split squat version with the lower foot, and we talked about how when the foot is higher, like about the relative height of a bench, especially for a shorter or individual like me, or even the average height person, by putting that foot forward, watch what my torso does just lifting my foot onto that. It goes forward. What does that tell us? Primarily looking at hip dominant. Okay, it goes forward. I have to do that. Well, in this aspect of training, we embrace that. We don't try to fight it. So here I want the bench, roughly bench height, and I'm going to allow the dumbbells to go in front of my foot now, not behind me as we did in the squat version. And I want to go here like this. Notice I have a nice straight, solid back. I'm not rounding. Here, so I'm keeping my torso in front, which really loads this aspect. Whereas here, you see, it's more this aspect. I hope you can see that. So this is actually a little bit more knee-friendly, and I would say a little more natural. Some people might see this and think this is bad form. They think the only way to do it is only staying up tall. Same thing is, I've had clients go to gyms and do these anterior lunges, and the gym trainer comes up to them and tells them they're doing lunges wrong. Well, it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish with the lunge. It's only wrong if you're trying to really target the quads and do a knee dominant exercise. But here, we're looking at deadlift variations and we're focusing on the posterior aspect of the body. If that's what you're trying to target, then a forward lean, not rounding, a forward lean is exactly what you want. So those are two great options. Anterior lunges, split squat, variation with an anterior lean. You can go dead in the middle of those two and just stagger your stance and hinge like this, hardly any weight here, and just hinge. That's kind of a halfway point. I can also use a barbell for that. A lot of great options there. You can hear I'm breathing. These are not easy. One of my favorite tools to use in addition to dumbbells and kettlebells and barbells is to take a barbell and use the Sorinex landmine home base. And we like to apply that to this version of a single leg Romanian deadlift. Check this out. So I'm going to stay on my outside leg, not my inside leg, grab the bar, and then stand up with it. And if I need to balance, I'll put the foot down. Readjust, down, tap the weight, come up. Now all the same form applies to this movement. The difference is the way the weight is moving. With the landmine, the weight is moving this way, which is kind of like cutting laterally. That's why you don't want to lift it with the inside leg, because the inside leg pushes you that way and the weight's going that way. So inside hand, outside leg. So one of my favorite single leg, single arm Romanian deadlift combinations. We don't use it with two arm. This is a great way to add some variety and a new challenge. If you've been doing the dumbbell versions, you've been doing the cable versions. We actually have a whole DVD that we developed with Bert Soren, who's the inventor of the Sorinex landmine, that we did, and that has some of the most innovative, coolest exercises like this exercise in that. So if you're interested in learning more about the landmine applications for the total body pushing, pulling, core, complexes, combinations, everything, check out that DVD. All right, so let me show you the last exercise in the deadlift variations here. We call this a single leg, single arm cross body deadlift. Now this is more like a traditional deadlift action, not the Romanian deadlift, which is a pure hip hinge. So there's a little more knee bend here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to balance on my left leg, hold a dumbbell in my right side. And the difference here is I'm not going to let this foot, my free foot, a non-weight bearing foot, counterbalance and fall back like this. Because when I counterbalance myself, that's actually giving me stability. Whereas if I don't allow it to counterbalance, I have to create more stability through my hips and through my core. So it doesn't look like it changes the exercise much, but believe me, you do a few reps and you'll know it does. So here's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to drop straight down. So see this foot stays there. I don't necessarily want to touch the floor because see that rounds me, so this is about as far as I've got. And then I'm going to come up. So drop down, touching my rib to my thigh, and then I'm going to come up. You can see how this kind of looks like a deadlift with a barbell, like this, except I'm here and here. And the reason why I'm going across like that, watch how that kind of winds my hip up. You see that? That's exactly how you run, how you walk. So it's the shoulder and hip combination. They call it the serape effect. So we're just kind of using that. Some people in the fascial line world call it spiral line. It's all the same stuff. We're really coordinating the hip and the opposite shoulder. So let me show you from this view. Single leg balance, not letting this foot counterbalance. Drop down, and then I'm going to come up. You might call that a squat. That's fine. Maybe you think this fits better in the squat section. That's fine too. We primarily get this in the glutes, so we consider it still more of a hip dominant type movement. One more rep. Let me show you from the front. Switch sides. A little creaky on this side. I don't know if you can hear that, but I've had surgery on this knee. I actually have a little arthritis on my right knee compared to my left knee. I don't know if you can see that or not. There's my scar. Single leg training has made a big impact on my own strength because I played sports for several years with a torn ACL, and I was able to control that torn ACL, that lack of instability, or that lack of stability with strong glutes and good proprioception from all the single leg training that I did. I developed arthritis because of that, which was a mistake. I kind of waited too long on my surgery. So now, a couple years after that surgery, this knee, from all the arthritis, changes the way this leg functions a little bit. So single leg training has become an integral part of my training because if I only did bilateral training, I would definitely be severely imbalanced and my left leg would really get it all. So a little personal story I wanted to throw in there. But it can benefit everybody, whether you're uninjured, just for performance, muscle symmetry, but if you have past injuries, man, single leg training can really benefit you. I'm proof of that. All right, we saved the best for last. This is the exercises that are my personal favorites. These are the hybrid exercises. Now, a hybrid exercise, what I consider a hybrid exercise, is something that you really couldn't classify as a pure squat or a pure deadlift variation. It's kind of a combination of somewhere in the middle. Or you're going to see some combo exercises here, which I've also classified as hybrids, which kind of combine maybe a squat variation followed by a deadlift variation or vice versa. The reason why I say these are my favorite movements is these are mostly my go-to movements. So the way we do single leg training here at Performance University, as long as you're healthy, you don't have knee problems or back problems, you don't have any special considerations, for the most part, these are the exercises that we're going to stick with. But don't forget about the other exercises that we showed you as well. So the first one I want to cover is step-ups. Now, I know this is not a new exercise to you. Step-ups have been around. They've been a staple in bodybuilding circles. But for the most part, I don't really see too many strength coaches using step-ups. And I used to not use them because I didn't really like the fact that you could help from your back leg. So, I would see this back leg kind of pushing off, and then people would get up there and I'd go, oh, they're pushing off their back leg. Why? It's not really that good. But then I started thinking, well, wait a minute, why is that a bad thing? Because in running, we want to use both legs. When you're teaching someone how to take off for their 40, you want to teach them how to explode through both their legs, not just their front leg, not just their back leg. That's efficiency. So I've had a change of heart on the step-ups, and it's actually become one of my favorite combination hybrid lower body exercises because it involves a nice systematic kind of sharing of movement from the back leg to the front leg. So here's how we coach step-ups. Start your foot on the bench. I like you to lean forward slightly. That puts the weight on the front leg as opposed to being here where you have to shift yourself forward. Lean forward so you feel that both legs are now loaded. This leg is loaded and this leg is loaded. I couldn't pick this leg up and I really couldn't pick this leg up without shifting my weight. So I'm dead at the center. And then from there I'm going to punch this leg down into the bench, punch my toes down into the floor, boom, and explode up. And then I'm going to try to control myself down. Toes first and then heel hits. Now I made that a little robotic sounding, so let me show you how to do a couple reps in real time. So notice you don't see me shifting back and shifting forward. I keep my weight right here. Now, you want to ramp that up a little bit, make it a little more of a sports performance related exercise. for someone who's an athlete, someone like a runner, or someone who plays a sport like soccer or football where they're running a lot, try to give them a rep a second. So basically what I'm looking at there is a quick explosion, bang, top down, bang, bang. You get a nice, almost like a plyometric action at the ankle to keep punching into the ground. And there's a quick turnaround there between the eccentric load gained from the fall and the concentric transition. You can hear how I'm breathing. That's no joke. As far as the height of the bench for step-ups, we're looking at something that's roughly knee height, maybe slightly below. If you start to get above the height of the knee, you're really high up there, and we find it starts to interfere with the mechanics that we desire a little bit. So a bench, traditional bench height, fits perfect for me. So let me show you some combinations that you can work into to add a step up in. Oh, by the way, if you're going to change legs, notice how this was all in the same leg here, like that. If you're going to change legs, switch on the floor. Switch on the floor when you do it. If you switch when your feet are on the bench, it becomes confusing. When you switch on the floor, you add that element of hip flexion in there. Plus, it's easy to kind of get that marching action. But when you go here, watch this. See, I'm always stepping down with my left, or sorry, stepping up with my left and stepping down with my right. It becomes confusing. So check this out. Here's a great combination. Reverse lunge to a step up. Down, back, here. So that's a great combination. Now, why am I putting the lunge version as a hybrid? Watch my torso when I do this reverse lunge. You see how close my torso is? My rib is actually on my thigh. Let me turn around. My rib is actually on my thigh. This is how most people perform a lunge. And again, a lot of people coach them out. They want to say, get up here. But in the beginning of this DVD, I was talking about load sharing. What I'm looking for here is not to make a movement purely dominant in one joint area, is to make it a load share, because that's what makes an athlete more efficient. So what I'm saying here is most of these hybrid movements apply more to, I would say, athletes than they do to physique competitors. Physique competitors, you want to try to isolate that bicep. You want to try to isolate those pecs. But for athletes, we want to try to teach them all to work together in timing and rhythm. That's what good athletes do. So for athletes, I allow them, and I actually encourage them to show me timing and rhythm between hip movement, knee movement, and ankle movement. As long as they look like this, look at my back, and not that. So I hope you understand that. That makes things a lot easier on your knees. And if I can give you an example, what do you think is going to eventually lead to more overuse injury related to your knee, hypothetically? Where I'm always doing knee dominant training and putting all the force here on my knee, or I'm allowing my hip, knee, and ankle all to do it together. Well, of course, the purely knee dominant version is going to potentially lead to more overuse injury in my knee faster, because my body is designed to share the load. That's why your fascial system is a system. It's linked together from top to bottom, and from this shoulder to this shoulder, or this shoulder to this hip to this shoulder. It's all linked together. So this is just utilizing that concept. So let me show you another great combination with the Sorinex landmine. Like I said, we have a whole DVD that covers how to use this thing to get an incredible total body workout. Here we're referencing single leg training. This is a combination squat, single leg squat, single leg deadlift. Check it out. Outside leg, inside hand. Step up, get my balance. Deadlift. So that's at my hip, and then I'm going to drop at my knee. Hip, and then drop at my knee. One more. This is a tough one. A lot of weight on there for me. And come up there. So, squat, deadlift. That's a great total body, or total lower body workout. Let me show you how to do that here on the bench. Whether you have a high foot position or a low foot position, Check this out. Put my foot up. I'm going to drop down with the dumbbells behind my foot, and then I'm going to hinge at my hip and drop the dumbbells in front of my foot. Behind my foot, I'm still leaning slightly forward, and then hinge at the hip, so it's like an RDL. Notice I'm not really long and not all the way back like this. I think that's a little tough on your knee. So instead, I'm going to be more like this, always forward. So drop the back knee down, and then here, hinge at the hip. So showed you a multitude of combinations there. Like I said, we call these hybrids because you really can't classify them as one or the other, but they're a very efficient way to get an amazing lower body workout done regardless of what your goals are. Here's a really cool and super effective hybrid lower body training exercise using a waist belt and JC bands. So you attach the waist harness to the bands, pull the waist harness up around your hips and waist area, slide out till you feel some tension, and now you have two ways to do it. You can start with a setup that's kind of where your feet are directly underneath, and then from here I'm going to push into the ground with my hips forward and kind of take a big power step. Boom! And then I'm going to come back. Boom! And I want to try to get my hips. I'm not just leaning, because remember, look, this is pulling my butt back. So just to stand tall, I'm going into hip extension, right? So by pushing this way, look at that hip extension. Does that not look like a good sporting position to you? It does to me. The other way to do it is you start from a partially staggered stance. This is a greater range of motion. Now this leg here is my left leg is the leg that I'm focusing on. So from here, not going to lean too far forward. I'm going to step through. Boom, big step there. You see, I got to catch myself. Then I'm going to slide this foot back, catch, do it again. Ooh, lost my balance there. That's the idea. Had to catch it that time. And come through. So now we'll switch. So now the front leg is the leg I'm really working on here. So I have to really push all the way through to get a good functional type of hip extension as I would if I was locomoting forward, running, pushing into somebody. Here. Come back. Here. Come back. Now, if you like that exercise application, but let's say you don't have one of these harnesses or you're on a budget and you don't want to spend the money on the harness. A traditional bodybuilding weight belt will work just the same, or if you're not going to use a weight belt at all, you can grab the handles. You can lean forward like this. Don't let it pull you back like that, like it's trying to rip your shoulders off. And we have the same concept here. Boom, come back, boom, come back, boom. So now I'm really punching into the ground. I personally like the stagger stance here. Back like that. Here. Back like this. So that's also a nice replacement for one of those sleds if you don't have a sled. Sled's a great option. Not everybody has the room for it. So that's a way to work around it. You get a sled-like workout, but in a very close quarters here, little space. A lot of people don't consider that kind of stuff single leg training, but it absolutely is because we're dominating on one side and not the other. And like I said, that actually happens a little bit more in sports especially than just this pure stance. So it's important to not only do bilateral, but to do this kind of split stance and single leg stance in your workout. I mentioned when doing the band exercise, if you don't have access to a sled, those were alternatives. Well, if you do have access to a sled or one of these prowlers from my friends at EliteFTS.com, let me show you a few single leg versions that you could do with this. Now, by nature, sled dragging or sled pulling is kind of single leg because you have one leg always pulling in front of the other. A lot of people don't think of it as that, but it really is. But let me show you how to really enhance the single leg aspects of it. If you're really applying this from a strength training perspective, not a conditioning perspective, which is a lot of what these devices were developed for in the first place, especially the Prowler. I personally like to use it as strength training. Load this thing up really, really heavy. Basically, you just put the plates down the arms here. I've left it without plates for demonstration purposes. And what I'm going to do here is take a small stagger stance, like so. This is the emphasis leg right here. Lean in, and then just take a big stop forward, just like that. Now that's a very, very functional type movement for any sport that involves someone standing, shooting in wrestling, takedown, kicking something, running. It's all right there. So I'm going to show you again. I'm just doing this in a very small space. Obviously, if we were going long ways to track towards the camera here, of course, I would repeat different sides. So I'm going to go here. Instead of a long stride, I'm going to shorten my stride. Here, this is the leg. Let's emphasize this leg now. Here, and then I push through. And then what I would do here, watch. I would step this foot up again and drive again. Step up again, drive again. Do it again. So, small staggered stance, focusing on this foot, push all the way through, long stride. Step up, like this, here, do it again. I messed that one up here, there we go. So, the goal there is like whatever foot I have in front, here, push that leg through, long stride. That's what we're looking for there. Now, let's get the prowler out of the way for a second. Talk about the sled. Same thing could apply to the sled, front and back, and this actually was part of my rehabilitation when I was rehabbing from ACL surgery. Can lean here, stagger my stance, focusing on my left leg here, I drive it through. Then reset again, drive it through. Reset again, drive it through. Reset again, drive it through. Just like that. Then, turn around here. If I'm looking for more quad dominant, watch this. I focus on one leg. So I'm just going to step back and then pull. Then the same leg, back and then pull. And then back and then pull. So if you have a weak side that you know is weak, like myself, is my right side, my surgery side, I'm definitely going to give some more time in the work that I put in the gym with exercises like this, and like the prowler, like all the single leg versions I've showed you throughout the video, on my right side to bring back balance to an already unbalanced situation. So, basically all we're doing is we're taking the best aspects of the sled training and enhancing them to force one side to work a little bit harder than the other. That improves sports performance, helps bring back muscle balance and strength. Let's look at some more hybrid lunge variations. This is what we call a slider lunge. You could use this with one of these gliders. My friend Valerie Waters makes these things she calls Val Slides, which she named after herself. It's a great product. Or if you're on a slippery surface, you could just be in a sock, use a paper plate. It just depends on what you have available. So let's get the Val Slide out. So basically put the Val Slide down, grab a set of dumbbells. I can hold the dumbbells here. I can hold them here. I can hold a single dumbbell goblet position, which is here. So let's go with that version. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to keep the weight on my left leg, so my right leg is free. I don't want to put my weight back here because then I slip all over the place. And then I'm just going to drive this leg. I'm going to kick this leg back, and then I'm going to pull it forward like somebody is resisting and trying to keep my right leg back there. Here, pull it forward. Here, pull it forward. Now notice again, I keep emphasizing this because it's important. It's an important coaching tip to me, is it's okay to let that torso lean forward a little bit and let that bottom rib touch your thigh, because that's efficiency. That incorporates the hips and the knee and the ankle. You see all three are working together. Whereas if I stay perfectly tall like a lot of people coach it, you don't really see this happen a lot in sports. It's more like here. So we like to incorporate that into our exercises as well. And then by pulling that in like that, really incorporates the hamstrings a little bit more than you might be used to in just a regular lunge. So let me show you some more lunge combinations. This is just what I call a cycle lunge. It's just front to back. So I'm going to go into a reverse lunge. Again, it's okay to get the torso forward. Excuse me, I got to get back here a little bit. So here, and then I'm going to come forward and lean into it. Push back, tap for balance, forward, here. If I want to go a little anterior lunge, check this out. Anterior lunge, reverse lunge. Anterior lunge, that's really a lot on the glutes. And then here, a little more quad. So that's a great combination. You could do a traditional walking lunge. If you're doing your walking lunges, just make sure again that you stop and drop, come up through, stop and drop again. I'm not a big fan of this whole really tall thing. Leaning in slightly is how we do the front walking lunges. I'm not going to spend a lot of time demoing that because I've talked about it before, and walking lunges are a pretty common exercise. Let me show you a single leg walking squat. Check this out. So I step, drop into the knee tap squat. Step, drop into the knee tap squat. That's my tougher side. Step, drop into the knee tap squat. Now, and I can do that for 20 yards or so. Another reason why I like to have the foot behind, I left this out of the first section, is to catch my balance. If my foot's out in front when I do a squat and I lose my balance, I'm done. But if I go here and I lose my balance, look, just put my foot down and I haven't lost anything. Regain position and I go again. So, show you a few more reps. This is my bad side. Go down as deep as I can. Come on. Down. And I can do that for distance. I can do an anterior walking lunge, and this one is awesome on your hamstrings and glutes. One of my favorites. Check this out. Step forward, anterior lunge. Now instead of pushing back, watch this. Forward and then drive through. Here and drive through. Here, drive through. Here and drive through. So now I'm getting that scissor-like action. Not only do I have the eccentric load here, but now I gotta pull it through. Make sure I keep a good arch in my back. And of course you could alternate legs or do the same leg for a few reps there. So, got a lot of combinations, hybrid movements. You can see I get excited about these. This is the way my single leg training tends to go these days. Blend that with your bilateral training. You got a heck of a comprehensive lower body workout. On behalf of the entire Performance University team, I'd like to thank you for your interest in our work and promise to continue to deliver the best in performance training and education. Until next time, we invite you to keep in touch with us on the web at performanceu.net and nicktuminello.com.